After 68 years of life and 4 decades of running my own business, my son Vincent expected me to sleep on a cot in his unheated garage between lawn equipment and half-empty paint cans. I sat on the edge of that flimsy bed, clutching the property management documents in my purse, papers showing I'd owned the luxury Westbrook Heights apartment complex where he lived for the past 15 years. Papers that would soon change everything about our Christmas morning. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The irony wasn't lost on me as I pulled the thin blanket tighter around my shoulders. The woman who owned 8 residential properties across Bayridge Harbor was spending Christmas Eve in a garage while her son and his wife entertained their important guests in the 5-bedroom house I had helped them afford. My name is Eleanor Caldwell. Most people in Bayridge Harbor know me as Ellie, the quiet widow who runs the small bookkeeping service downtown. Few people, including my own children, know about my real estate investments or the financial empire I've quietly built since my husband Raymond passed away 23 years ago. I stared at the small space heater Vincent had grudgingly plugged in, its orange coils barely warming the December air that seeped through the garage door seams. "Just for tonight, Mom," he had explained with forced patience when I arrived that afternoon. "Clarissa's parents are staying in the guest room and her boss and his wife have the den. We're trying to make partner at the firm, and this dinner could make all the difference." The unspoken message was clear. My presence in their home was an inconvenience to be managed, not a joy to be celebrated. My own son, the boy I'd raised alone after Raymond's heart attack, the child whose college tuition I had paid in full while working 60-hour weeks, saw me as an obstacle to his ambitions, rather than the woman who had made those ambitions possible. I hadn't always been invisible to Vincent. Once, I'd been his world, the mother who attended every soccer game, who taught him to balance a checkbook, who nursed him through mono his sophomore year of high school. We'd been a team, just the two of us against whatever challenges life presented. The change began during his years at Westlake University. The prestigious business school transformed my down-to-earth son into someone increasingly concerned with appearances, connections, and status. By the time he married Clarissa Bradford from the banking family Bradfords, the gulf between us had widened into something I barely recognized. At first, I'd been invited to Sunday dinners at their new house, the down payment for which had come from my emergency savings that I'd offered when they found their dream home. But those invitations became less frequent, the conversations more strained, the criticisms more pointed. "Mom, couldn't you update your wardrobe a bit? Clarissa's family is very appearance conscious." "Mom, maybe don't mention your bookkeeping business when the Hendersons come over." "Mom, would you mind using the service entrance when the partners are here? The front walkway is newly landscaped." Each request chipped away at my dignity, but I acquiesced, telling myself it was what mothers did. We sacrificed for our children's happiness. But something about this garage cot on Christmas Eve felt like a line crossed, a fundamental disrespect I couldn't ignore. I pulled out my phone and thumbed through photos of my granddaughter Lily, the one pure relationship in this complicated family dynamic. At 7 years old, she hadn't yet absorbed her parents' status consciousness. To her, I was simply Nana Ellie, who taught her card games and slipped her extra cookies when her mother wasn't looking. "Nana will have a special Christmas surprise," I whispered to her picture, a plan forming in my mind. You might wonder how a mother ends up relegated to garage sleeping quarters while still holding significant financial power over her son's living situation. The answer lies in choices I made years ago, choices to remain quietly self-sufficient, rather than broadcasting my success. After Raymond died unexpectedly in 2000, leaving me with a 16-year-old son and a modest life insurance policy, I threw myself into building financial security. The bookkeeping business provided steady income, but it was the real estate investments that transformed our situation. I started small, a foreclosed duplex purchased at auction, renovated on weekends, then rented to reliable tenants. The income from that property funded the next purchase and the next. By the time Vincent graduated college, I owned 5 residential properties, all managed through Harborview Properties, a management company where I was listed in the corporate documents, simply as E. Caldwell principal investor. I never flaunted my growing wealth, continuing to live in the same modest 3-bedroom ranch house where Vincent grew up, driving sensible cars, and reinvesting most profits. When the Westbrook Heights luxury apartment complex came up for sale, 15 years ago, I recognized the opportunity immediately. Located in the prestigious Heights neighborhood with panoramic views of Bayridge Harbor, the building represented the upper echelon of local real estate. I leveraged equity from my other properties and became the majority owner, still operating, through Harborview with minimal public connection to the investment. 3 years later, when Vincent and Clarissa were looking for an upscale apartment after returning from their honeymoon, I wasn't surprised when they fell in love with a 3-bedroom unit at Westbrook Heights. What did surprise me was Vincent's complete lack of curiosity about my offer to speak to a connection who could help with their application. He simply accepted the reduced security deposit and favorable lease terms as his due, never questioning how his bookkeeper mother had such convenient connections. For 12 years, they lived in that building before purchasing their house, never knowing that the property management company they occasionally complained about was ultimately answering to me. I had kept my investment portfolio private, not out of deception, but from a long-established habit of financial independence. Raymond had always handled our money during our marriage, sometimes making decisions I questioned. After his death, I vowed never to be financially vulnerable again. Now, sitting on this uncomfortable cot as Christmas Eve ticked toward midnight, that same instinct for self-protection stirred within me. I had allowed my son's perception of me, as aging, increasingly irrelevant, someone to be managed rather than respected, to go unchallenged for too long. From the house, I could hear laughter, the clink of wine glasses, Clarissa's practiced social laugh. Through the small window, I watched shadows move across the dining room blinds, my son hosting holiday celebrations while his mother sat among power tools and storage bins. I opened my purse again, touching the folder containing property records, tenant agreements, and the most recent financial statements from Harborview Properties, including what most people didn't know, that Vincent's mortgage on this very house had been quietly purchased by my holding company last year when the original lender sold off a portfolio of loans. Tomorrow would be Christmas, a time for truth, for reckonings, for new beginnings. I set my alarm for 6 a.m. before the household would stir. By the time Vincent and Clarissa came downstairs for coffee, Santa wouldn't be the only one delivering surprises. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Before I tell you what happened on that Christmas morning, I want to thank all of you who've been sharing your own family stories in the comments. It's remarkable how many of you have faced similar situations with children, who've forgotten the sacrifices you made. For those just joining us, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from. And if my story resonates with you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I'm sharing something special about what happened when my granddaughter Lily discovered the truth about Nana's job. After that uncomfortable night in Vincent's garage, I couldn't help reflecting on how we communicate, or fail to communicate, with the people we love most. The distance between perception and reality can grow so vast, can it? You might look at me and see just another gray-haired grandmother. In sensible shoes, my son certainly did, but appearances rarely tell the complete story. Let me take you back to my early days in Bayridge Harbor, long before Vincent's Christmas garage incident. Perhaps understanding how I built my life will help you appreciate why his dismissal cut so deeply. I arrived in Bayridge Harbor in 1980 as a young bride. Raymond had accepted a position at the local bank, and we purchased a modest home on Sycamore Lane with a 30-year mortgage that seemed impossibly daunting at the time. The neighborhood wasn't prestigious. Working families, tidy yards, children playing kick the can until streetlights flickered on. But it was ours, and we were proud. Raymond handled our finances entirely. "Don't worry your pretty head," he'd say when I asked about investments or retirement planning. This was common for marriages in our generation, but it always left me feeling slightly uneasy. I had excelled in mathematics throughout school and worked as a bookkeeper before Vincent was born. Numbers made sense to me in a way people sometimes didn't. When Vincent arrived in 1984, I channeled my analytical mind into creating detailed baby books, tracking milestones, organizing our home with mathematical precision. Raymond indulgently called it my accountant's approach to motherhood. What he didn't recognize was my growing awareness of our financial vulnerability. His spending occasionally outpaced his income, and his investment choices were driven more by tips from golf partners than careful research. I started squirreling away, small amounts from our grocery budget, building a secret emergency fund in a shoebox behind my winter sweaters. By Vincent's 5th birthday, I had saved nearly $3,000, not a fortune, but enough to create a thin buffer between our family and disaster. That buffer proved thinner than I'd hoped. When Raymond suffered his first minor heart attack in 1992, our insurance covered most medical expenses, but his 8-week absence from work strained our finances to breaking point. I withdrew my emergency fund to keep mortgage payments current, relieved I'd had the foresight to prepare, but shaken by how quickly security could evaporate. During Raymond's recovery, I convinced him to let me handle the family budget temporarily. With access to our complete financial picture for the first time, I was alarmed by what I discovered. Credit card debt, a home equity loan I hadn't known about, retirement savings that had been partially withdrawn for a boat purchase that never materialized. We weren't on the brink of ruin, but we were far from the stable foundation I had believed in. I still remember the night I confronted Raymond with spreadsheets detailing our situation. His face flushed with a combination of shame and indignation. "I've always provided for this family," he insisted. "You've never wanted for anything." "But at what cost to our future?" I asked. "Vincent will be looking at colleges in a few years. What happens if your health declines again?" That conversation marked a turning point in our marriage. Raymond reluctantly allowed me to take over household finances, though he maintained control of his retirement accounts and investments. I implemented a disciplined budget, systematically paid down high-interest debt, and returned to part-time bookkeeping work while Vincent attended middle school. By 1997, our financial picture had improved significantly. The mortgage was refinanced. At a better rate, credit cards carried zero balances, and I had rebuilt an emergency fund, this time with Raymond's knowledge and grudging respect. I suggested we consider purchasing a small investment property, perhaps a duplex we could rent out to supplement our income. "Real estate is for people with money," Raymond dismissed. "We're middle class, Ellie. Best stick to what we know." I didn't argue, but I continued researching. I subscribed to investment newsletters, borrowed books from the library on property management, and attended a free workshop at the community college on real estate investment strategies for beginners. Knowledge was accumulating like compound, interest in my mind, waiting for the opportunity to be applied. That opportunity arrived in the most painful way possible. Raymond's massive heart attack in 2000 left 16-year-old Vincent fatherless and me a widow at 45. After the funeral, when the casseroles stopped arriving and friends returned to their busy lives, the enormity of my new reality settled in. I was now solely responsible for our financial survival. The life insurance policy, which I had insisted Raymond increase years earlier despite his complaints about premiums, provided $250,000. Most widows in my situation might have preserved this sum, investing conservatively to supplement income. Instead, after setting aside enough for 3 years of Vincent's projected college expenses, I made a decision that my practical husband would have considered wildly reckless. I purchased a foreclosed duplex on Cedar Street for $120,000, a property that had previously been valued at $200,000 before the owners divorced and abandoned mortgage payments. It needed approximately $30,000 in renovations, which I planned to complete gradually while working full-time at my now expanded bookkeeping service. Weekends became a blur of painting, minor plumbing repairs, flooring installation, and landscape rehabilitation. Vincent, still processing his father's death, alternated between reluctant assistance and typical teenage withdrawal. "Why can't we just be normal?" he complained one Saturday while helping me install kitchen cabinets. "Other mothers join book clubs or date after their husbands die. You're turning into Bob Vila." "Bob Vila makes money," I responded, measuring twice before cutting. "And so will we." 6 months later, both units were rented to carefully screened tenants at $850 monthly each. After mortgage, insurance, and setting aside funds for future repairs, we cleared approximately $900 in monthly profit. I reminded Vincent of his earlier complaints as we deposited the first rent checks. "This is what security looks like," I told him. "This is how we ensure your future." That first property became the foundation of everything that followed. The positive cash flow allowed me to save aggressively for a second investment while maintaining our comfortable, if modest, lifestyle. Vincent left for Westlake University in 2002 with tuition fully funded and without the burden of student loans that would haunt many of his classmates for decades. While he immersed himself in business theories at school, I provided real-world case studies through my growing property portfolio. By his junior year, I owned 4 residential properties and had established Harborview Properties as a legal entity to manage them more efficiently. I shared these developments during his infrequent calls home, hoping my practical application of business principles might provide common ground as he matured. Instead, Vincent seemed increasingly embarrassed by my hands-on approach to wealth building. "Mom, you don't need to be unclogging tenants' toilets anymore," he complained during one holiday break. "That's what property managers are for." "Property managers cut into profit margins," I explained. "Besides, I don't mind the work. It keeps me connected to my investments." He rolled his eyes in that way young adults do when they believe they've intellectually surpassed their parents. That's small-time thinking. Real wealth comes from scale and delegation. The irony of being lectured on wealth creation by my college student son whose education I was funding through precisely these small-time investments wasn't lost on me. But I listened, nodding at appropriate intervals, filing away his theoretical knowledge while continuing my practical education in the real estate market. Perhaps this was where our paths truly began to diverge, where Vincent's perception of success became entangled with appearances and status, while mine remained firmly rooted in financial independence and quiet accomplishment. As his world expanded through internships with prestigious firms and connections with wealthy classmates, mine grew through carefully calculated risks and reinvested returns. By the time he graduated and accepted his first position at Harmon and Blackwell Financial, the slight condescension in his attitude toward my work had hardened into something closer to dismissal. His occasional references to Mom's little rental business when introducing me to his colleagues made it clear he considered my achievements quaint at best, embarrassing at worst. I could have corrected him, of course. I could have mentioned that my little rental business now included 7 properties with a combined value exceeding $2 million. I could have noted that my net worth likely surpassed that of some partners at his firm. But something held me back. A combination of maternal pride in his career, private satisfaction in my own accomplishments, and perhaps a lingering curiosity about how long he could maintain his misconceptions. Now, lying on that garage cot on Christmas Eve, I wondered if my silence had been a disservice to us both. Had my reluctance to assert my financial success contributed to Vincent's dismissive attitude? Had my desire to see him succeed independently enabled him to forget the foundation I had provided? As the night grew colder and sounds of celebration continued from the house, I made a decision. The site. Time for silent accomplishment had passed. Christmas morning would bring not just presents under the tree, but the unwrapping of truths long concealed by my own doing. The revelation wouldn't just be about property ownership or financial worth. It would be about recognition, of sacrifices made, of intelligence underestimated, of respect overdue. Vincent had placed me in the garage among discarded and utilitarian objects. Tomorrow, he would discover just how profoundly he had misjudged my place in the world we both inhabited. Sleep eluded me in that cold garage as memories flooded back. Memories of everything I had done for Vincent throughout his life. Sacrifices. He seemed to have conveniently forgotten as he rose through the ranks at Harmon and Blackwell. I remember the morning after Raymond's funeral vividly. Vincent, 16 and trying desperately to appear strong, had come downstairs in his father's old sweater, drowning in fabric that still carried Raymond's scent. "What happens now, Mom?" he'd asked, his voice cracking despite his efforts to sound grown up. "We keep going," I'd told him, setting a plate of scrambled eggs before him. "We adjust. We build something new." Those early days of widowhood had been a careful balance, grieving my husband while ensuring my son didn't feel our world had completely collapsed. I maintained routines, attended his soccer games, supervised homework, all while restructuring our finances and working extended hours at the bookkeeping service. When the first property tax bill arrived for the duplex on Cedar Street, I experienced a moment of paralyzing doubt. Raymond's voice seemed to whisper in my ear, "This is too much responsibility, Ellie. You're in over your head." I almost called the realtor to list the property. Instead, I spread my financial documents across the dining room table after Vincent went to bed, calculating and recalculating until the path forward became clear. The duplex needed to generate positive cash flow immediately. I couldn't afford professional contractors for the renovations, so I taught myself what I needed to know. The local hardware store became my university. YouTube tutorials my professors long before such self-education became commonplace. I learned to replace bathroom fixtures by disassembling our guest bathroom and reassembling it, practicing before tackling the rental units. I studied basic electrical work, careful to remain within safety guidelines and code requirements. For more complex tasks, I bartered my bookkeeping services with local tradespeople, filing quarterly taxes for Mr. Daniels the plumber in exchange for his expertise with the water heater installation, organizing invoices for Mrs. Layton's landscaping company for help with the duplex's neglected yards. Vincent occasionally assisted, though increasingly under protest as the months passed. "None of my friends' mothers are installing ceiling fans or patching drywall," he complained one Saturday. "None of your friends' mothers are building a business," I countered. "Besides, these are valuable skills. You never know when you'll need them." He rolled his eyes, a gesture that would become increasingly familiar through his teenage years. "I'm planning to make enough money to pay people for this kind of work." I didn't argue. Instead, I showed him how to properly tape drywall seams, thinking of it as a different kind of education than the one he was receiving in school, practical knowledge that complemented theoretical learning. Whether he appreciated it or not, the first month both units were fully rented marked a turning point. I remember sitting at the kitchen table, holding the rent checks, and experiencing a profound realization. These pieces of paper represented not just money, but validation. My judgment, my work, my vision had created value where others had seen only problems and abandoned responsibilities. When Vincent was accepted to Westlake University with its prestigious business program and intimidating tuition, neighbors and family members asked discreetly how I planned to manage the expense. "We've been saving," I said simply, not elaborating that saving involved leveraging equity from the now appreciated duplex to acquire a small 4-unit building on Magnolia Court that generated enough additional monthly income to cover his educational expenses. The morning I drove Vincent to campus for freshman orientation remains etched in my memory. The car packed with dorm essentials, his expression alternating between excitement and apprehension as Bayridge Harbor disappeared. In the rearview mirror, at the dormitory, surrounded by other families, many clearly more affluent, fathers in golf shirts discussing stock portfolios, while mothers coordinated interior decoration of dorm rooms, I felt momentarily out of place in my practical sundress and comfortable shoes. "Mom," Vincent whispered urgently as we carried boxes up to his assigned room. "Let me handle the talking with my roommate's family, okay?" "Why?" I asked, genuinely puzzled. He hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "They're from Greenwich. His dad runs a hedge fund." I understood the implication immediately. He was embarrassed, not of me personally perhaps, but of what I represented. A single mother, a bookkeeper, someone who worked with her hands on rental properties, someone who didn't belong in this environment of old money and elite connections. Rather than creating a scene, I nodded and stepped back, allowing him to navigate this new social terrain while I arranged his desk supplies and made his bed with the precision that characterized all my undertakings. I told myself his reaction was natural, just a young man eager to establish his own identity separate from his upbringing. I believed the phase would pass as he matured. Instead, it deepened. With each semester at Westlake, Vincent seemed to absorb not just business principles but the social values of his wealthy peers. His calls home became less frequent. When he did call, conversations centered on networking events, exclusive study groups, and internship opportunities arranged through classmates' family connections. During his sophomore year spring break, which he spent not at home but at his roommate's family beach house in the Hamptons, he called with what he clearly considered helpful advice. "Mom, you should really think about selling those properties and investing in a managed fund," he said. "It's so much cleaner than dealing with tenants and toilets. My finance professor says individual landlords almost always underperform the market." "Is that so?" I replied, phone cradled on my shoulder as I reviewed applications for a newly vacant unit. "And does your finance professor factor in the tax advantages of depreciation? Or the leverage opportunities of mortgage debt on appreciating assets? Or the inflation hedge provided by rising rents?" A pause. "Well, I'm just saying there are more sophisticated ways to invest nowadays." "I appreciate your concern," I said, evenly. "But my unsophisticated approach has paid your tuition without student loans, which puts you ahead of most of your classmates already." He changed the subject quickly, mentioning an upcoming fraternity formal. I let the moment pass, but it marked another milestone in our diverging perspectives. During his junior year, Vincent secured a prestigious summer internship at Goldman Sachs, an opportunity that genuinely impressed me. When he called to share the news, I expressed my pride unreservedly. "That's wonderful. Your hard work is paying off." "It was Jeremy's father who made the introduction," he admitted. "But I had to nail the interviews on my own." "Connections open doors," I acknowledged. "But you still have to walk through them successfully. I'm proud of you." I meant it sincerely. Despite our differences, I recognized his ambition and intelligence. What troubled me was his growing tendency to attribute success primarily to social connections rather than fundamental capabilities, a perspective that seemed to diminish the value of my own achievements built without such advantages. That summer, Vincent lived in a Manhattan apartment with 3 other interns, their combined rental payment exceeding what most families in Bayridge Harbor spent on housing. I continued acquiring properties, adding a mixed-use building downtown with commercial, space below, and 3 apartments above. When the tenant in Unit 2 at the Cedar Street duplex, my very first property, moved out after 7 years, I renovated the space completely, increasing the monthly rent by 30%. While Vincent wore designer suits to his internship, I wore coveralls to sand hardwood floors. While he attended networking events at exclusive clubs, I negotiated with contractors and suppliers for the best materials at the lowest prices. Our lives operated in parallel universes, connected by history, but increasingly disconnected in values and daily reality. By his senior year, the transformation was complete. Vincent returned home for Thanksgiving break with expensive highlights in his hair, a cashmere sweater that cost more than my monthly mortgage payment, and a subtle, but unmistakable, air of condescension toward Bayridge Harbor and everything it represented. "You should see the alumni networks at Westlake, Mom," he commented over dinner. "Graduates from 20 years ago making calls to create opportunities for current students. It's all about who you know and maintaining the right image." "And what image are you maintaining?" I asked, genuinely curious about his self-perception. He considered the question seriously. Professional? Polished? Someone who belongs in boardrooms making significant decisions? Someone who understands how the world really works? The implication hung in the air between us, that I, with my practical clothes and hands-on approach to wealth building, did not understand how the world really works. That my success, substantial as it was becoming, somehow counted less because it lacked the glossy veneer he now associated with achievement. Rather than challenge him directly, I asked, "And does belonging in boardrooms make you happy, Vincent?" He looked momentarily confused, as if happiness were tangential to the metrics of success he now valued. "It's not really about happiness, Mom. It's about impact and recognition." I nodded, serving him another helping of mashed potatoes made from scratch. "Well, different paths work for different people. I just want you to be fulfilled by whatever choices you make." He smiled indulgently, the way one might at a child expressing a simplistic view of complex matters. "That's because you've always been content with smaller ambitions." The comment stung, but I let it pass without correction. Perhaps it was maternal pride, wanting him to believe he had already surpassed me, that the path was clear for him to achieve things beyond my reach. Or perhaps it was a kind of experiment, seeing how long he could maintain his misconceptions when evidence of my success surrounded us, if only he had eyes to see it. As his graduation approached in spring 2006, Vincent received multiple job offers from prestigious firms. He accepted the position at Harmon & Blackwell Financial in Bayridge Harbor, rather than opportunities in New York or Boston, a choice that secretly pleased me despite his explanation that it offered the fastest track to significant responsibilities. What he didn't know, what I didn't tell him, was that 3 partners at Harmon & Blackwell were tenants in my downtown commercial building, and that the firm's managing partner, Richard Blackwell himself, had once consulted me about potential real estate investments for his personal portfolio. I had established a reputation among Bayridge Harbor's business elite, not as Vincent's mother, but as E. Caldwell, a shrewd property investor with an eye for undervalued assets and the discipline to maximize returns. Our worlds were about to intersect in ways Vincent couldn't anticipate. But first, there would be more lessons for us both to learn about perception, reality, and the true meaning of success. As I lay on that uncomfortable cot in the garage, these memories swirled through my mind. The choices I had made: to build quietly, to reinvest consistently, to value substance over appearance, had created genuine security and prosperity. Vincent's choices reflected different values, ones that had ultimately led him to place his mother among stored holiday decorations and garden tools, while important people enjoyed the comfort of his home. Tomorrow would bring a reckoning not just about property ownership, but about the very nature of respect, accomplishment, and family obligation. As Christmas Eve faded into Christmas morning, I finally drifted to sleep, Raymond's voice seeming to whisper from somewhere beyond, "Show him who you really are, Ellie. It's time." The gradual erosion of my place in Vincent's life accelerated after he married Clarissa Bradford 3 years into his career at Harmon & Blackwell. I had watched with mixed emotions as their relationship developed, pleased to see my son building a life, concerned about the values that seemed to guide his choices. Clarissa came from the kind of family Vincent had come to admire during his college years. The Bradfords had established Bayridge Harbor's second-largest bank 4 generations earlier. Their name graced the hospital's East Wing, the university's business school, and the Performing Arts Center downtown. Their annual Christmas gala was covered in the society pages, their charitable donations announced with professional press releases. I met Clarissa for the first time at a restaurant so expensive the menu didn't list prices. Vincent had called the previous day with uncharacteristic nervousness. "Mom, I'd like you to meet someone special tomorrow night. Can you make it to Aurelio's at 7? "Of course," I agreed, mentally cataloging my wardrobe for something appropriate. "Anyone I should know about?" "Her name is Clarissa Bradford," he said, a note of pride evident in his voice. "She's in wealth management at First Maritime Bank." The Bradford connection registered immediately. "Bradford as in Bradford Banking Group?" "Her grandfather founded it," he confirmed, "but don't make a big deal about that. She's very down-to-earth despite her background." I arrived at Aurelio's 15 minutes early, wearing my best navy dress and the pearl earrings Raymond had given me on our 10th anniversary. The maitre d' escorted me to our table with a deference that suggested Vincent had emphasized the importance of the evening. When they arrived, Vincent's body language told me everything I needed to know. The protective hand at Clarissa's elbow, the slight nervousness in his smile, the way his eyes darted between us seeking signs of approval. He was smitten, perhaps even in love, and very, very concerned about making a good impression. Clarissa was undeniably beautiful. Tall and willowy with chestnut hair pulled into an elegant chignon, diamond studs in her ears that could have funded one of my early property purchases. Her handshake was firm, her smile practiced but pleasant. "Mrs. Caldwell, I've heard so much about you," she said, settling gracefully into her chair. "Vincent says you're the most practical person he knows." I wasn't entirely sure that was meant as a compliment. "Please call me Eleanor, or Ellie if you prefer. And yes, I suppose I am practical. It's served me well over the years." The conversation flowed more smoothly than I'd anticipated. Clarissa asked thoughtful questions about my bookkeeping business, listening attentively to my responses. Vincent relaxed visibly as the evening progressed, clearly relieved that no social catastrophes had occurred. Only once did I notice something. That gave me pause. When the server asked about our meal, Clarissa mentioned almost as an aside, "Everything was lovely, though the scallops were slightly overcooked." The comment itself wasn't remarkable. The criticism was mild and probably accurate. What caught my attention was Vincent's reaction, a flash of something like admiration in his eyes, as if her willingness to find fault in a $45 entree represented sophistication rather than entitlement. As their relationship progressed, I saw more instances of this dynamic. Vincent increasingly adopted Clarissa's preferences, her manner of speaking, her judgments about everything from restaurants to neighborhoods to appropriate vacations. When they became engaged 8 months after that dinner, I was happy for Vincent's happiness, while harboring private concerns about the foundation of their relationship. The wedding planning revealed new dimensions to our evolving family dynamic. At our first dinner to discuss arrangements, Clarissa's mother, Genevieve, took immediate control. "We've reserved the Bradford estate for the ceremony and reception," she announced, passing elegant folders to Vincent and Clarissa. "The gardens will be perfect in June." I glanced at Vincent, expecting some consultation about such a major decision, but he was nodding enthusiastically. "It looks amazing. Don't you think so, Mom?" "It's beautiful," I acknowledged, glancing through. Professionally shot photographs of manicured grounds and a Georgian mansion that could have housed 6 families comfortably. "I'd be happy to contribute to the expenses, of course." A brief, awkward silence fell over the table. Genevieve recovered first. "That's thoughtful, Eleanor. But Harold and I always planned to give Clarissa her dream wedding. The Bradford estate has hosted family weddings for 3 generations. We've budgeted for everything," Harold Bradford added, his voice carrying the absolute confidence of someone who had never worried about money. Though Vincent mentioned you might want to handle the rehearsal dinner, something intimate for 30. Or 40 people. 30 or 40 people constituted intimate in Bradford terms, apparently. I nodded, mentally calculating what such an event might cost and whether it could be managed from cash flow or would require liquidating one of my more modest investments. I'd be happy to, I said. Perhaps at the harbor room? They have a lovely private dining space with views of the water. Another glance between the Bradfords. Clarissa touched Vincent's arm lightly. Darling, didn't you say the harbor room is a bit dated? What about Maison Laurent? They've just renovated their event space. The harbor room was indeed less trendy than Maison Laurent, but its cuisine was exceptional, and the owner was a longtime client of my bookkeeping service. I had hoped to support his business while arranging a special evening for Vincent. Maison Laurent, with its imported French chefs and celebrity clientele, would cost nearly 3 times as much. Maison Laurent would be lovely, I said after a brief pause. Vincent smiled gratefully, clearly relieved I hadn't insisted on my preference. That pattern repeated throughout the wedding preparations. My suggestions were politely acknowledged, then gently redirected toward more expensive, prestigious options. The modest floral arrangements I proposed became elaborate installations from a designer who had worked with Vogue. My recommendation of a talented local photographer was dismissed in favor of a team that had documented celebrity weddings in the Hamptons. Vincent seemed increasingly uncomfortable with my involvement, as if my practical approach to planning might somehow diminish the event's perceived elegance. When I suggested handwritten notes as place cards, something personal I could contribute, he winced visibly. Mom, the calligrapher has already been booked. She does all the Bradford events. By the time the wedding day arrived, I had been effectively relegated to the role of honored guest rather than mother of the groom. I sat in my assigned seat in the front row, wearing a custom-made dress in the exact shade of blue Genevieve had specified for the mothers, watching my son marry into a family that valued appearance and status above all else. At the reception, I danced with Vincent during the obligatory mother-son dance, feeling the distance that had grown between us despite our physical closeness. "Are you happy, Vincent?" I asked softly as we moved across the floor. His smile seemed genuine. "Incredibly. Happy, Mom. Clarissa is amazing, and the Bradfords have been so welcoming. Mr. Bradford is already mentioning introducing me to the managing partners at Fulton and Marsh when I'm ready to make my next career move. Connections again. Always connections and appearances and status markers rather than substance." I squeezed his hand as the dance ended. "I just want you to be truly happy, not just successfully positioned," I said. He kissed my cheek. "They're the same thing, Mom. You'll see." After the honeymoon in Santorini, a wedding gift from Clarissa's godfather, Vincent and Clarissa began their married life in a 3-bedroom apartment at Westbrook Heights, the luxury building I secretly owned. Their rent was subsidized by my connection, though they still complained about the cost during family dinners. 12-month leases are so restrictive, Clarissa commented during one such evening at their apartment. "Daddy says we should consider buying instead of throwing money away on rent." "Real estate can be an excellent investment," I agreed, suppressing a smile at the irony as I sat in a building that generated significant monthly income for my portfolio. Though the responsibility of maintenance isn't for everyone. Vincent laughed. "That's why people hire property managers, Mom. Not everyone wants to spend weekends fixing toilets like you did." The dismissive tone stung, but I let it pass. "Different approaches work for different people," I said mildly. "I've found hands-on management gives me better control over my investments." "What investments?" Clarissa asked with genuine curiosity. "Vincent mentioned you owned a couple of small rental properties." "Just a few local units," I said vaguely, not correcting her assumption. "Nothing as impressive as Westbrook Heights, of course." Vincent changed the subject quickly, apparently uncomfortable with any reminder of my modest real estate activities. It was becoming increasingly clear that he had created a narrative about me, practical, hardworking, but fundamentally limited in vision and achievement, that served his own self-image as someone who had transcended his origins through talent and connection to better people. The birth of Lily a year later brought momentary warmth back to our relationship. In the hospital room, holding my granddaughter for the first time, I felt Vincent's hand on my shoulder, a genuinely affectionate gesture untainted by status considerations. "She's perfect, isn't she?" he whispered. "Absolutely perfect," I agreed, gently touching Lily's tiny fingers. "Hello, little one. Nana's here." "Mother, we discussed this," Clarissa interjected from her bed. "She'll call you Grandmother Eleanor. Nana is so common." The moment shattered. Vincent's hand slipped from my shoulder as he moved back to his wife's side. "Right, of course," he agreed immediately. "Grandmother Eleanor sounds more dignified." I said nothing, just smiled down at Lily, who would ultimately make her own decisions about what to call me, regardless of her parents' preferences. In the years that followed, I built a relationship with my granddaughter, despite the increasing constraints Vincent and Clarissa placed around our interactions. Clarissa's parents received prime holiday time and unlimited access, while my visits were carefully scheduled and often rescheduled when more important social obligations arose. When Vincent and Clarissa purchased their current house in the prestigious Oak Ridge neighborhood 3 years ago, with substantial financial assistance from the Bradfords, the physical distance between us increased alongside the emotional one. My invitations to Sunday dinner became quarterly events rather than weekly traditions. Lily's school performances and recitals were sometimes mentioned only after they had occurred. "Sorry, Mom, we thought you'd be busy with work," Vincent would explain when I expressed disappointment at missing important moments. "It was a last-minute thing anyway." The last-minute things always seemed to include the Bradfords, who apparently were assumed to have perpetually open schedules despite Harold's position as bank chairman and Genevieve's involvement with multiple charitable boards. The final erosion came gradually, in small moments of dismissal and disregard. Vincent consulting me about financial matters less and less, despite my expertise. Clarissa making decisions about family gatherings without considering my availability. Comments about my clothing, my car, my home becoming more frequent and less subtle. "Mom, wouldn't you be more comfortable in something more current?" Vincent suggested before one dinner with his colleagues. "Have you considered trading in that sedan for something that reflects your success a bit more?" he asked another time, as if my 10-year-old Toyota represented failure rather than practical transportation. "The house on Sycamore Lane looks so dated now," Clarissa commented during one visit. "Wouldn't you enjoy something in one of the newer developments? Something easier to maintain?" Each suggestion carried the same underlying message. I was becoming irrelevant, embarrassing, something to be managed rather than respected. My values, practicality, financial independence, substance over appearance, were treated as quaint relics rather than principles that had created genuine security and prosperity. By the time Vincent called about Christmas arrangements this year, our relationship had deteriorated to the point where I was honestly surprised to be included at all. "We'd love to have you for Christmas Eve and Christmas Day, Mom," he said, his tone suggesting he was conferring a significant favor. "Clarissa's parents will be there, of course, and her boss, Richard Blackwell, and his wife have accepted our invitation for dinner on Christmas Eve." "That sounds lovely," I replied sincerely, touched to be included in their holiday plans after feeling increasingly marginalized. "What can I bring?" "Just yourself," he said quickly. "Clarissa has everything planned perfectly. And Mom, maybe wear that blue dress you bought for Lily's christening. The one with the jacket?" I agreed, ignoring the implied criticism of my usual wardrobe choices. Perhaps this was an opportunity to rebuild some of what had been lost between us. It wasn't until I arrived on Christmas Eve, suitcase and carefully wrapped gifts in hand, that I discovered my actual place in their holiday plans. Not at the elegantly set dining table where Clarissa was arranging name cards. Not in the tastefully decorated guest room where the Bradford luggage was already placed. Not even in the converted den where Richard Blackwell and his wife would stay. My place was in the garage, on a cot hastily assembled between stored holiday decorations and garden equipment, with a small space heater as my only defense against the December chill. "It's just for the night, Mom," Vincent explained with that same forced patience he'd been using with me for years. "We need to make the right impression on Richard. This promotion could change everything for us." As he closed the garage door, behind him, returning to the warm house filled with people deemed more valuable than his mother, something shifted inside me. Decades of accommodation, of allowing Vincent to maintain his illusions about my life and success, suddenly felt not like maternal selflessness, but like a profound disservice to us both. Perhaps it was time for the truth. All of it. Starting with who actually owned the building where his important dinner guests lived, the apartment complex where he and Clarissa had begun their marriage, and even the mortgage on the house where I was apparently not good enough to sleep inside. Morning couldn't come quickly enough. The space heater clicked rhythmically in the pre-dawn darkness, its orange glow the only light in Vincent's cavernous garage. I checked my watch, 5:17 a.m. Christmas morning. The concrete floor radiated cold through the thin rug Vincent had placed beneath the cot, and my breath formed small clouds in the chilled air. Sleep had been fitful at best. Between the physical discomfort and the emotional turmoil, I drifted in and out of consciousness, each awakening bringing fresh clarity about my situation. There comes a point in every relationship when accommodation becomes erasure, when accepting disrespect crosses the line into self-betrayal. Somehow, on this cold December night, I had reached that threshold. I sat up slowly, wrapping the inadequate blanket around my shoulders, and reached for my purse. From its depths, I withdrew the folder of documents I'd brought as a kind of talisman, a physical reminder of the truth Vincent had never bothered to discover. In the dim light, I traced my fingers over Harborview Properties' embossed logo on the cover page. Perhaps I should have revealed everything years ago. Perhaps maintaining the illusion of modesty while Vincent constructed his narrative about my small-time success had been a mistake, one born partly from maternal pride in his independence, partly from curiosity about how long he could maintain his misconceptions, and partly from a lifelong habit of understating my accomplishments. Raymond had often complained about that tendency during our marriage. "You downplay everything you achieve, Ellie," he'd say with frustration. "Take some credit for once." But decades of conditioning, as a woman, as a wife from a specific generation, as someone raised to value humility, had made self-promotion feel uncomfortably like boasting. Now, sitting on this cot in my son's garage while important people slept comfortably inside his house, a house secured with my invisible financial support, I realized my silence had enabled Vincent's dismissal. By allowing him to believe I was less accomplished than I was, I had given him permission to treat me accordingly. I opened the folder, illuminating the pages with my phone's flashlight. Property deeds, management agreements, financial statements, tangible evidence of a success story Vincent had never bothered to investigate. My net worth, conservatively calculated, now exceeded $8 million. The rental income from my various properties generated more annual revenue than Vincent's base salary at Harmon and Blackwell, even before his hoped-for promotion. But this wasn't about money, not really. It was about recognition, about respect, about a son who had placed status and appearances above the most fundamental bonds of family and gratitude. As dawn gradually illuminated the garage windows, I made a decision. There would be no angry confrontation, no dramatic scenes to disrupt the Christmas morning Vincent and Clarissa had so carefully orchestrated for their important guests. Instead, there would be truth, calmly presented, impossible to dismiss, and offered without apology. I rose from the cot, folded the thin blanket with precise corners, old habits die hard, and gathered my belongings. From my suitcase, I withdrew the blue dress Vincent had suggested, the one acceptable outfit in his estimation, and changed quickly in the frigid air. I applied makeup using the small mirror from my purse, arranged my silver hair neatly, and added the pearl earrings that had been my constant companions through decades of life's changes. Looking at my reflection, I saw not the fading, increasingly irrelevant figure Vincent perceived, but a woman who had built something substantial through intelligence, persistence, and quiet confidence. A woman who deserved better than a garage cot on Christmas morning. I checked my watch again, 6:30 a.m. In the main house, Lily would likely be awake soon, eager to discover what Santa had brought. Vincent and Clarissa would be preparing coffee. For their guests, arranging breakfast pastries on Clarissa's grandmother's silver trays, creating the perfect backdrop for their carefully curated holiday narrative. It was time to introduce an unexpected plot twist. With my purse and folder in hand, I approached the door connecting the garage to the kitchen. Taking a deep breath, I stepped into the warm house that my son had deemed appropriate for everyone but his mother. The kitchen was empty, but alive with morning preparations. The coffee machine gurgled, timer set to provide perfect timing for the household's awakening. Platters of croissants and muffins from Bayridge Harbor's most expensive bakery sat ready on the marble countertop. Through the doorway to the living room, I could see the Christmas tree, professionally decorated in silver and blue to match Clarissa's preferred holiday aesthetic, surrounded by artfully arranged presents. I moved quietly to the coffee machine, poured myself a cup in one of Clarissa's bone china mugs, and settled at the kitchen island to wait. The folder lay before me, a simple manila rectangle containing revelations that would permanently alter Vincent's understanding of his world and his mother's place in it. Footsteps on the stairs announced the first stirrings of the household. I straightened my shoulders, took a sip of coffee, and prepared for whatever came next. Vincent appeared first, sleep-rumpled in expensive pajamas and a monogrammed robe. He stopped abruptly in the doorway, clearly surprised to find me already inside. "Mom, I was just coming to check on you." His eyes darted to the clock on the microwave. "It's not even 7 yet." "I've always been an early riser," I replied calmly. "You know that." He moved to the coffee machine, pouring himself a cup while glancing nervously toward the main part of the house. The Blackwells might come down soon. They mentioned being early risers, too. "How convenient," I said, maintaining my composure. "I look forward to meeting them." Vincent's expression shifted to concern. "Mom, maybe you should have breakfast in the garage for now? Just until everyone's up and settled? We've got a whole schedule planned and—" "No, Vincent." The words came out softly, but with unmistakable firmness. "I will not be eating breakfast in the garage." He blinked, startled by my uncharacteristic refusal to accommodate his wishes. Before he could respond, Lily's voice echoed down the stairwell. "Daddy, Santa came. Can we open presents now?" The patter of small feet on the stairs grew louder as my granddaughter descended in pink unicorn pajamas, her dark hair a tangle of sleep-mussed curls. She stopped mid-staircase when she spotted me. "Nana!" she shrieked, abandoning grandmother Eleanor protocol in her excitement. She launched herself down the remaining stairs and into my waiting arms. "You're here. Santa brought you too." I hugged her tightly, inhaling the sweet scent of her strawberry shampoo. "Merry Christmas, sweetheart. And yes, nothing could keep me away from you today." Vincent hovered awkwardly by the coffee machine, clearly torn between enforcing his wife's nomenclature preferences and avoiding a scene on Christmas morning. "Lily, remember what Mommy said about inside voices when guests are sleeping?" "But it's Christmas," she protested with 7-year-old logic. "And Nana's here." More footsteps announced the arrival of Clarissa, impeccable even at this early hour. In a cashmere lounge set, her chestnut hair somehow perfectly arranged despite the early hour. "Lily, darling, what did we say about—" She stopped when she saw me sitting at the island. "Oh, Eleanor, you're up early." "Good morning, Clarissa," I replied pleasantly. "Merry Christmas." Her smile tightened almost imperceptibly. "Merry Christmas. I hope the garage wasn't too uncomfortable. We really had no other option with all our guests." "Actually," I said, maintaining eye contact, "it was quite uncomfortable. Quite inappropriate, in fact." The directness of my response seemed to startle her. Clarissa was accustomed to my acquiescence, my willing acceptance of whatever diminished role they assigned me. This small act of self-assertion represented a seismic shift in our dynamic. Vincent stepped forward, coffee pot in hand as if offering a peace treaty. "Mom, we explained the situation. It was just for one night, and we're trying to make the right impression with Richard. This promotion is crucial for our future." "I understand the importance of impressions, Vincent," I replied. "More than you might realize." Lily, still perched on my lap, looked between the adults with the intuitive awareness children often possess during moments of tension. "Why did Nana sleep in the garage? That's where the spiders live." A beat of uncomfortable silence followed her innocent question. Clarissa recovered first. "Lily, why don't you go check your stocking while we get breakfast ready?" She gestured toward the living room. "I think Santa might have left something special in there." My granddaughter hesitated, clearly reluctant to leave what promised to be an interesting adult conversation. "Can Nana come see my stocking with me?" "In a minute, sweetheart," I promised, giving her one more hug before helping her down from my lap. "Nana needs to talk to your parents about something important first." Once Lily had disappeared into the living room, I turned back to Vincent and Clarissa. "I've been thinking all night about why I accepted being placed in your garage rather than simply leaving or insisting on different arrangements." Vincent shifted uncomfortably. "Mom, can we discuss this later? The Blackwells and Clarissa's parents will be up soon, and no, we cannot discuss this later," I interrupted, my voice still calm but brooking no argument. "For years, I've accepted your gradually diminishing view of my worth. I've allowed you to construct a narrative about me that bears little resemblance to reality. I've smiled and nodded while you've treated me as someone whose comfort and dignity are less important than impressing people like Richard Blackwell." Clarissa's eyes widened, not accustomed to this version of her accommodating mother-in-law. "Eleanor, I think you're overreacting. It was just one night, and we really had no—" "You had options," I cut in. "You could have given me the den and put the Blackwells in a hotel. You could have asked your parents to stay at their house, which is less than 30 minutes away. You could have acknowledged that your mother deserves better than sleeping storage space." Vincent's face flushed. "Mom, that's not fair. We've included you in our holiday plans, bought you gifts, made sure you could spend time with Lily. And now you're creating a scene over sleeping arrangements." I took a deep breath, centering myself. This wasn't about the garage, not really. The garage was merely the culmination of years of subtle degradation, of being reduced from mother to inconvenience. But explaining that would lead to defensiveness rather than understanding. Instead, I placed my hand on the folder before me. "Vincent, do you know what Harborview Properties is?" The abrupt change of subject seemed to confuse him. "What?" "Some local management company, I guess. What does that have to do with anything?" "When you and Clarissa moved into Westbrook Heights after your honeymoon, did you ever wonder how I was able to arrange such favorable lease terms for you?" He shook his head, impatience evident. "You said you knew someone, a client or something." "Mom, why are we talking about this now?" I opened the folder, removing a document and sliding it across the island toward him. "Because it's time you understood who your mother actually is, rather than who you've assumed her to be." Vincent glanced down at the paper, the ownership certificate for Westbrook Heights luxury apartments, with E. Caldwell prominently listed as principal owner. His expression shifted from irritation to confusion. "I don't understand. This has your name on it." "Yes," I said simply. It does. Clarissa moved closer, examining the document over Vincent's shoulder. This can't be right. Westbrook Heights is worth millions. It's owned by Harborview Properties. Harborview Properties is my company, I explained, my voice steady. I established it 20 years ago to manage my real estate investments. I own 8 properties across Bayridge Harbor, including the building where Richard Blackwell lives, the West Side. Silence that followed was profound, broken only by the distant sound of Lily playing with her stocking treasures in the living room. Vincent stared at the document, then at me, his expression cycling through disbelief, confusion, and the dawning realization that his fundamental understanding of our relationship had been built on false assumptions. That's not possible, he finally managed. You're a bookkeeper. You have a small business. I am a bookkeeper, I confirmed. I also happen to be one of the largest individual property owners in Bayridge Harbor. The two aren't mutually exclusive. I reached into the folder again, this time withdrawing the mortgage document for their current home. I also own your mortgage, Vincent. When Hampshire Bank sold their local loan portfolio last year, Harborview purchased it, including the loan on this house. Clarissa sat down abruptly on one of the island stools, her perfect composure finally cracking. You own our mortgage? But why wouldn't you tell us? I considered the question thoughtfully. Why would I need to? You've made it abundantly clear that my financial decisions and business activities are small-time, unworthy of serious consideration. Vincent has been dismissing my little rental business for years without ever bothering to ask about the details. Vincent's face had gone pale. Mom, I never meant— Yes, you did, I interrupted gently. You meant every dismissive comment, every condescending explanation of how real finances work, every implication that my achievements were quaint rather than substantial. You constructed a narrative about me that made it acceptable to place me in the garage while important people slept in proper bedrooms. He had the grace to look ashamed. I was trying to impress Richard. The promotion is with a firm where 3 partners rent commercial space in my downtown building, I finished for him. Richard Blackwell consulted me about his personal real estate investments 2 years ago. He knows exactly who E. Caldwell is, though he may not have connected that person with your mother. The sound of movement upstairs signaled that the other guests were awakening. Vincent glanced anxiously toward the ceiling, then back at me. What do you want, Mom? He asked quietly. What are you going to do? It was the pivotal question. One I had contemplated throughout that long, cold night in the garage. What did I want from this revelation? Revenge? Apology? Recognition? Looking at my son's face, I realized what I wanted most was simply to be seen, truly seen, for who I was, rather than who he had decided I must be. I'm not going to do anything, Vincent, I said finally. I'm not going to embarrass you in front of your guests or reveal our connection to the Blackwells. I'm not going to call your mortgage due or evict you from your home. Relief flooded his expression, followed immediately by confusion. Then why tell us now? Why not just leave things as they were? I smiled sadly, understanding that despite the documentary evidence before him, he still didn't fully comprehend the depth of his misjudgment, because relationships built on fundamental misconceptions aren't sustainable. Because continuing to accept your diminished view of me would be a disservice to us both. And because no one, not even your mother, should ever be expected to sleep among garden tools when they own the mortgage on your house. The sound of footsteps on the stairs grew louder. Our moment of private reckoning was ending. Soon the carefully orchestrated Christmas morning would proceed. Presents would be opened, breakfast consumed, appropriate gratitude expressed for perfectly selected gifts. But something fundamental had shifted in the foundation of our relationship. Vincent knew now that his mother was not who he had believed her to be. Whether that knowledge would lead to genuine respect remained to be seen. I closed the folder and stood, smoothing my blue dress, the only outfit in my wardrobe Vincent had deemed acceptable for his important guests. Shall we join Lily for stockings? I suggested calmly. I believe I hear the Blackwells coming down for breakfast. As we moved toward the living room, Vincent touched my elbow lightly. Mom, he whispered. I'm sorry about the garage, about everything. I didn't know. That's the point, Vincent, I replied quietly. You never asked. Christmas morning proceeded with an undercurrent of tension beneath the polished surface. Vincent and Clarissa maintained their practiced social smiles while stealing uncertain glances in my direction. I participated in the festivities with calm dignity, accepting my granddaughter's enthusiastic hugs, making appropriate small talk with the Bradfords and Blackwells, and complimenting Clarissa on her perfectly roasted turkey at dinner. If the other guests noticed anything amiss, they gave no indication. Richard Blackwell, an imposing figure with silver hair and the confident bearing of someone accustomed to authority, chatted amiably about market trends and community developments. His wife, Patricia, elegant in a cashmere sweater set, complimented my pearl earrings and asked thoughtful questions about my bookkeeping business. Only once did Richard's gaze linger on me with a flicker of recognition. Caldwell, he mused after Vincent introduced us. I've encountered that name recently in a professional context. It's a common enough name, I replied with a small smile, watching Vincent tense beside me. Though I do have business interests, beyond my bookkeeping service. Richard's eyebrows rose slightly, interest piqued. Is that so? Perhaps we should discuss them sometime. Always looking for local investment opportunities. I'd be happy to, I said, handing him a business card from my purse. Not the modest one for Eleanor's bookkeeping services that Vincent had seen countless times, but the cream-colored card embossed with Harborview Properties logo and E. Caldwell Principal in understated type. At your convenience. Richard studied the card, recognition dawning in his eyes. Well, he said quietly, tucking the card into his shirt pocket with newfound respect. This is unexpected. I believe we have a mutual connection in Herbert Jameson at First Maritime Bank. Herb has managed my commercial accounts for 15 years, I confirmed. A very capable banker. Vincent stared at our exchange with undisguised shock. His mother was casually discussing banking relationships with the man he'd been desperately trying to impress, the man for whom I'd been relegated to garage sleeping quarters to avoid embarrassment. The irony wasn't lost on either of us. As evening approached and guests began dispersing to their respective rooms for pre-dinner rest, Vincent cornered me in the kitchen while Clarissa entertained the others in the living room. Mom, he whispered urgently, how do you know Richard Blackwell? Why didn't you ever tell me about... He gestured vaguely, seemingly unable to articulate the scale of what he'd discovered about me. You never asked, I replied simply, rinsing my coffee cup at the sink. And until last night, it didn't seem relevant to correct your assumptions. His expression cycled through confusion, embarrassment, and something approaching awe. But you own apartment buildings? Commercial properties? Our mortgage? When did you... I began investing shortly after your father died, I explained. That first duplex became 2 properties, then 4, then more. While you were learning business theory at Westlake, I was applying practical principles in the real world. Vincent leaned against the counter, processing this revelation. And Harborview Properties is yours? Completely? I'm the sole owner, I confirmed. Though I employ excellent property managers and maintenance staff, I stopped unclogging toilets myself around the time you graduated college. A ghost of a smile crossed his face at the reference to his long-ago criticism, followed immediately by deepening shame. The garage, he murmured. I put you in the garage when you own our... He couldn't complete the sentence. Yes, I said, simply. You did. We stood in silence for a moment, the weight of decades of misconceptions hanging between us. Finally, Vincent straightened up, decision evident in his posture. I'm going to fix this, he declared. Right now. I'll tell the Blackwells and Clarissa's parents that there's been a mistake. You'll take our room, and Clarissa and I will— No, I interrupted gently but firmly. You won't disrupt your carefully planned holiday arrangements. Not for me, but I've made other arrangements, I continued. After breakfast, I'll be leaving. Alarm flashed across his face. Leaving? Mom, you can't. It's Christmas. Lily would be devastated. I'm not abandoning Christmas, I assured him. I'm simply relocating it to more appropriate accommodations. Before he could question me further, I removed my phone from my purse and showed him the confirmation email I'd received while the family was opening presents. The presidential suite at the Peninsula Hotel in downtown Bayridge Harbor was reserved in my name for 3 nights, beginning immediately. The Peninsula? Vincent sounded stunned. That's the most expensive hotel in the harbor. The presidential. Suite costs. I'm aware of the cost, I interrupted with a small smile. I own shares in the hotel group. His mouth opened and closed without producing sound, reminding me briefly of the goldfish we'd kept in our living room when he was a child. I've arranged for a car service to collect me at 2 o'clock, I continued. The suite has 3 bedrooms. I've invited Michael and Diana to join me with their children. Michael was Vincent's closest childhood friend, now a successful pediatrician, married to Diana, a graphic designer I'd mentored early in her career. Their twin boys were close to Lily's age, and the families had once been regular dinner guests in each other's homes, before Vincent and Clarissa's social climbing had relegated the middle-class doctor to their B-list. Michael and Diana? Vincent repeated. You still see them? Regularly, I confirmed. They've been kind enough to include me in family gatherings even as my own son's invitations became increasingly scarce. The barb landed precisely as intended. Vincent flinched visibly. The suite also has a fully decorated Christmas tree, a gourmet dinner being prepared by the executive chef, and space for additional guests should anyone wish to join us. I maintained eye contact, letting him understand exactly what I was offering. Lily would enjoy playing with the twins. They've been asking about her. Understanding dawned in Vincent's eyes. I was executing a power move directly from the Bradford playbook, creating an exclusive gathering that others would desire to attend. The presidential suite at the Peninsula on Christmas would outshine even Clarissa's meticulously planned dinner in terms of prestige and luxury. You're inviting us? He asked uncertainly. I'm creating an option, I corrected. One that doesn't involve your mother sleeping in the garage or being treated as an afterthought. You and Clarissa can decide whether you'd prefer to maintain your current arrangements with the Blackwells and Bradfords, or join a celebration where everyone is equally valued. The stakes were clear. This wasn't just about Christmas accommodations. It was about Vincent publicly acknowledging his misjudgment and choosing to realign his priorities, or continuing to prioritize social climbing over family bonds. I glanced at my watch. I'll need to pack shortly. The car will be here in 30 minutes. Vincent's expression reflected his internal conflict. Mom, I can't just leave in the middle of hosting. Clarissa's parents, the Blackwells, what would we tell them? That's entirely your decision, I replied calmly, as was putting me in the garage. The parallel wasn't subtle, but subtlety had proven ineffective in penetrating Vincent's carefully constructed social narrative. Sometimes clarity required directness. I moved toward the garage to collect my suitcase, but Vincent's hand on my arm stopped me. Wait, he said, voice strained. At least let me help you with your things. You shouldn't have to go back in there. It was a small gesture, yet it represented the first crack in his facade, the first acknowledgement that his treatment of me had been fundamentally wrong. I nodded acceptance of this minimal amends. As Vincent retrieved my suitcase from the garage, I heard Lily's voice from the doorway. Nana, where are you going? It's still Christmas. I turned to find my granddaughter watching me with troubled eyes, still clutching the illustrated book I'd given her that morning. My heart constricted at her concerned expression. I'm going to a special place for Christmas dinner, I explained gently, kneeling to her level. A beautiful hotel with a big Christmas tree and lots of space for family. Her eyes widened with interest. Like a castle? Can I come see it? Of course you can, I assured her. In fact, Tommy and Alex might be there. She brightened at the mention of Michael's twins, whom she'd always enjoyed playing with before the families had drifted apart. Really? Can we go now? Her excitement was palpable. Clarissa appeared in the doorway behind her, expression tightening as she assessed the situation. Lily, what are you talking about? We're having Christmas dinner here, with Grandma and Grandpa Bradford and the Blackwells. But Nana's going to a castle with Tommy and Alex, Lily protested. I want to go too. Vincent emerged from the garage with my suitcase, taking in the tableau with evident distress. The carefully managed holiday was unraveling before his eyes, with his daughter openly preferring my alternative celebration to the prestigious gathering he and Clarissa had orchestrated. What's happening? Clarissa demanded, directing the question to Vincent rather than me. Why is Eleanor leaving? Why is Lily talking about going with her? Mom has made other arrangements, Vincent explained, his voice strained. She's checked into the presidential suite at the Peninsula and invited Michael and Diana's family to join her. Clarissa's eyes widened, first with shock, then with calculation. The Peninsula represented social currency she understood immediately. The presidential suite? That's $14,000 per night at standard rates, I supplied calmly, though as a significant shareholder, I receive preferential pricing. The revelation of my financial capacity seemed to hit Clarissa even harder than it had Vincent. Her gaze darted between my practical blue dress, sensible shoes, and the business card still visible in her husband's shirt pocket, where he'd absently placed it after Richard Blackwell returned it to him. Vincent? What is happening? She repeated, voice lower and more urgent. A recalibration, I answered for him, one that's long overdue. The doorbell chimed, announcing the arrival of my car service. Vincent looked panicked, trapped between irreconcilable obligations and collapsing assumptions. Mom, please, he began, though what exactly he was pleading for remained unclear even to him, I suspect. My car is here, I said simply. Lily, I'll see you soon, whether today or another day. Your parents will decide what works best for everyone. But I want to go to the castle, she insisted, looking between her parents with growing confusion at the palpable tension. I kissed her forehead gently. Sometimes grown-ups need to make complicated decisions, sweetheart, but I promise we'll have our special time together very soon. Vincent carried my suitcase to the front door, where a uniformed driver waited beside a gleaming black Mercedes sedan. The contrast between this elegant transportation and the garage accommodations I'd been assigned couldn't have been more stark. The Peninsula has an excellent Christmas buffet, I mentioned as the driver loaded my bag into the trunk, in case you decide the current arrangements aren't ideal after all. Vincent stood on the front step, uncharacteristically disheveled in his expensive holiday sweater looking utterly lost. Mom, I didn't know about any of it. I swear I didn't know. That's the curious thing about assumptions, Vincent, I replied, sliding into the plush leather back seat. They prevent us from seeing what's directly in front of us, even when it's been there all along. As the car pulled away from the house I'd helped my son purchase, I felt a complex mixture of emotions. Sadness for the years of misunderstanding, satisfaction at finally asserting my worth, and cautious hope that this disruption might ultimately lead to healing. My phone buzzed with a text message from Michael. Suite is amazing. We're settled in. Kids can't believe the gingerbread village in the lobby. Still okay for us to join your Christmas rebellion? I smiled and typed back, absolutely. Executive chef is preparing dinner for 6, easily expanded to 9 if certain. People reconsider their priorities. The car glided through Bayridge Harbor's elegant downtown, holiday decorations twinkling on every storefront. As we approached the peninsula's imposing facade, Doormen in formal uniforms stood at attention beneath the portico. "Welcome back, Ms. Caldwell," the hotel manager greeted me as I stepped from the car. "The presidential suite is prepared according to your specifications. Chef Marcel asks if 7 o'clock remains suitable for dinner service?" "Perfect," I confirmed, accepting his escort into the marble-floored lobby, where a 20-foot Christmas tree sparkled with thousands of tiny lights. The spectacular gingerbread replica of Bayridge Harbor occupied a prominent position near the grand staircase, delighting children and adults alike. As I ascended in the private elevator to the top-floor suite, I reflected on how different this Christmas had become from what I'd anticipated. When I'd accepted Vincent's invitation, I'd hoped for reconciliation, for a place at the family table, for simple recognition of my importance in my son's life. Instead, I'd received a garage cot and a profound revelation about how thoroughly I'd been diminished in my own family's eyes. But that diminishment had required my cooperation, my willingness to be less than I was. By finally standing firm in my complete identity, not just as Vincent's mother, but as E. Caldwell, successful investor and businesswoman, I had reclaimed something essential. The elevator doors opened directly into the suite's magnificent foyer, where Michael and Diana waited with their sons and a bottle of champagne. "Merry Christmas, Ellie," Diana said warmly, embracing me. "Or should we call you Ms. Caldwell, property mogul? Michael's been filling me in on your real estate empire?" I laughed, accepting the crystal flute of champagne Michael offered. "Ellie is still fine, though I admit it feels good to finally have the whole truth acknowledged." "To truth," Michael toasted, raising his glass, "and to choosing where and with whom you spend your holidays." As we clinked glasses, my phone buzzed again. A message from Vincent. "What time is dinner being served? Lily insists on seeing the gingerbread village. Might stop by with her if that's okay." It wasn't a full capitulation, but it was a start. A recognition that perhaps the presidential suite with people who genuinely valued each other might offer something his carefully orchestrated status display could not. I typed back a simple response. 7 p.m. Gingerbread Village worth seeing. Suite number 1601. Doorman will escort you up. Setting my phone aside, I turned to Michael and Diana. "We may have additional guests for dinner. It seems my son is reconsidering his holiday priorities." Diana squeezed my hand. "Good. It's about time Vincent remembered what actually matters." As the suite filled with conversation and laughter, the trauma of the garage cot began to recede. I had taken decisive action rather than accepting disrespect, and that choice was already reshaping relationships long distorted by false perceptions. Whether Vincent fully joined our celebration or merely made a brief appearance with Lily remained to be seen. But something fundamental had shifted. I had stopped accommodating his diminished view of me and instead insisted on being recognized for who I truly was. The garage key had unlocked more than just a temporary sleeping space. It had unlocked the truth about son and mother, about appearance versus substance, about the quiet power that comes from knowing your own worth, even when others fail to see it. Precisely at 6:45 p.m., the presidential suite's private elevator chimed. Michael's twins immediately abandoned their elaborate Lego construction to race toward the foyer, anticipating Lily's arrival. Diana smoothed her dress nervously. Despite my reassurances, she remained uncertain about encountering the Clarissa, who had gradually excluded her family from social gatherings over the past few years. "Relax," I advised her, adjusting a crystal vase of white roses that crowned the suite's magnificent dining table. "You belong here more than they do." The elevator. Doors slid open to reveal not just Vincent and Lily, but Clarissa as well. My daughter-in-law stood slightly behind her husband and daughter, her expression a complex mixture of curiosity, calculation, and barely concealed discomfort. "Tommy! Alex!" Lily burst from the elevator, immediately embracing her long-missed friends. "Nana has a castle!" Vincent stepped forward, looking both impressed and intimidated by the suite's obvious luxury. Tasteful Christmas decorations adorned every surface, a fire crackled in the marble fireplace, and floor-to-ceiling windows showcased a panoramic view of Bayridge Harbor's twinkling holiday lights. "Mom," he acknowledged with a nod that carried more respect than any greeting he'd offered me in years. "This is extraordinary." "Thank you," I replied simply. "I'm glad you could join us." I turned to include Clarissa in my welcome, determined to model the grace she had so often withheld from me. "Both of you." Clarissa advanced into the room, her practiced social smile firmly in place despite the evident strain around her eyes. "The Peninsula's presidential suite at Christmas," she observed. "Quite a statement, Eleanor." "I prefer to think of it as quite a gathering place," I corrected gently, "for people who value each other's company." Her smile tightened almost imperceptibly. "Of course, it's just unexpected. Vincent never mentioned—" "Vincent didn't know," my son interjected, an unusual note of humility in his voice. "Mom has apparently been successful beyond anything I realized." An awkward pause followed this admission. Diana, ever the gracious one, stepped forward to break the tension. "It's been too long, Clarissa. You look wonderful. How are your parents?" As the women engaged in carefully polite small talk, Vincent approached me directly. The children had already disappeared into the suite's entertainment room, where a professional gingerbread house decorating station had been arranged per my request. "Can we talk privately for a moment?" he asked, his voice low. I nodded, leading him onto the suite's expansive balcony. Despite the December chill, state-of-the-art heating elements kept the space comfortably warm. Below us, Bayridge Harbor's Christmas boat parade was beginning, vessels of all sizes adorned with elaborate light displays gliding across the dark water. Vincent leaned against the balcony railing, exhaling a cloud of vapor into the cold air. "You left out some details when you asked if we might stop by," he observed. "The Blackwells are having dinner with us too." I raised an eyebrow. "Richard and Patricia Blackwell?" He nodded, looking simultaneously impressed and unsettled. "Richard received a personal call from the hotel manager inviting them to join a special Christmas dinner in the presidential suite. Apparently, they're acquainted. Marcus and I serve on the hospital foundation board together," I explained. "The Peninsula hosts our annual fundraiser." Vincent shook his head in wonderment. "There's an entire life you've been living that I knew nothing about. Boards, investments, connections with people I've been desperately trying to impress. How did I miss all of this?" "You stopped seeing me," I replied simply. "Somewhere along the way, between Westlake and Bradford connections and Harmon and Blackwell, you decided who I must be rather than discovering who I actually was." He considered this, gazing out at the harbor lights. "That first property, the duplex on Cedar Street, was that really the beginning of all this?" "It was," I confirmed. 1. Building became 2, became 4, became a portfolio. I reinvested everything, lived modestly, and focused on building something sustainable. While I was... He trailed off. "While you were focused on appearances and connections," I finished for him. "On marrying into the right family, joining the right clubs, impressing the right people." He winced at the accuracy of my assessment. "I thought I was building something too, Mom. A life with status and security." "The difference," I observed quietly, "is that I never diminished your choices to achieve mine. I supported your education, celebrated your marriage, welcomed your wife, loved your child, all while you increasingly treated me as someone whose value diminished with age." Vincent flinched as if physically struck. "I never thought of it that way. Few people consciously evaluate their treatment of aging parents," I acknowledged. "But when you relegated me to your garage while important, people slept in proper bedrooms, you made your assessment of my worth perfectly clear." He turned to face me directly, his expression more open and vulnerable than I'd seen since his father's funeral. I'm sorry, Mom. Truly sorry. Not just for the garage, but for years of not seeing you. It was the most genuine apology he'd offered. Yet something in his tone suggested incomplete understanding. What exactly are you sorry for, Vincent? For treating me poorly, or for treating poorly someone who turned out to have more financial power than you realized? The question clearly startled him. That's not fair. I'm apologizing for how I've behaved, regardless of your financial situation. Are you? I pressed gently. Because I can't help wondering if this apology would be happening if I were exactly who you thought I was. Just a bookkeeper with a few small rental properties. A mother whose traditional achievements you'd outgrown. He opened his mouth to object, then closed it, honesty apparently prevailing over defensiveness. I don't know, he admitted finally. I'd like to think I would recognize how wrong the garage was regardless, but… He trailed off, unable to complete the self-indictment. I appreciated his candor. At least you're being honest now. The balcony door slid open behind us, revealing Clarissa framed in the warm light from inside. Vincent, the Blackwells have arrived, she announced, her voice tight with strain. And, Eleanor, there seems to be some confusion. Richard is acting as if he knows you professionally? Not confusion, I corrected calmly. Richard consulted me about real estate investments 2 years ago. We've served on several boards together. Clarissa's perfectly manicured hand tightened on the door handle. Boards? What boards? The hospital foundation, primarily, I explained. Also the Downtown Revitalization Committee and the Community College Scholarship Endowment. Vincent stepped forward, placing a steadying hand on his wife's arm. Clarissa, there's a lot we didn't know about Mom. She's been more successful than we realized. Clarissa's gaze darted between us, calculating implications. How successful? Rather than answer directly, I gestured toward the open door. We should join our guests. Chef Marcel has prepared a remarkable dinner, and it would be impolite to keep everyone waiting. As we re-entered the suite, the scene that greeted us might have been lifted from one of Clarissa's aspirational social fantasies. Richard and Patricia Blackwell stood near the fireplace, chatting amiably with Michael and Diana. The children played contentedly in the adjacent room under the supervision of the hotel's professional childcare attendant I'd arranged. Waitstaff, in impeccable uniforms, circulated with champagne and hors d'oeuvres. Ah, Eleanor, Richard called, crossing the room to greet me with the warmth reserved for equals. Marcus has outdone himself with this suite. And what a delightful surprise to discover our mutual connection through Vincent. Had no idea you were his mother. Family relationships rarely come up in foundation meetings, I replied with a smile. How is your son enjoying Stanford Medical School? Thriving, thanks to your insight about the scholarship endowment, Richard said, turning to include Vincent in the conversation. Your mother's financial acumen helped restructure the endowment portfolio, increasing available scholarships by 40%. James wouldn't have his research fellowship without her recommendations. Vincent's expression reflected stunned recalibration. This was the man he'd been desperately trying to impress. The man for whom he'd deemed his mother unworthy of a proper bedroom, crediting me with his son's academic opportunity. The dynamic I'd endured for years had suddenly, dramatically inverted. Clarissa, ever the social navigator, quickly adjusted her approach. Eleanor has always been so modest about her accomplishments, she offered, slipping her arm through mine with newfound affection. We've been encouraging her to talk more about her business success. The fabrication was so blatant I might have laughed had it not been so revealing of her character. Instead, I merely smiled. How thoughtful of you, Clarissa, especially after ensuring I had such comfortable accommodations in your garage last night. A strangled silence followed this direct reference to my treatment. Richard Blackwell's eyebrows rose nearly to his hairline, while Patricia beside him failed to entirely suppress a shocked cough. Garage? Richard inquired, looking between us, with evident confusion. A misunderstanding about sleeping arrangements, I explained smoothly, unwilling to completely humiliate Vincent and Clarissa despite the temptation. Fortunately, the peninsula always has space for preferred shareholders. The implication landed precisely as intended. Richard's expression shifted from confusion to barely concealed amusement as he reassessed the family dynamic before him. Indeed, they do, he agreed, raising his champagne glass in a subtle salute to my handling of the situation. Their Christmas hospitality is legendary. The moment might have remained uncomfortably suspended had Chef Marcel not appeared to announce dinner. As the group moved toward the dining table, Vincent detained me with a light touch on my elbow. That was merciful, he murmured. You could have embarrassed us completely. Embarrassing you isn't my objective, I replied quietly. Reclaiming my dignity is. The dinner that followed represented everything Clarissa had strived to create in her own home. Elegant presentation, impeccable service, prestigious company, yet achieved with an effortlessness that highlighted the strained nature of her efforts. Course after exquisite course arrived, accompanied by perfectly paired wines and conversation that flowed naturally between genuinely connected people. Most revealing was the children's table, set with the same care as the adults, but featuring child-friendly versions of each gourmet offering. Lily bloomed in the company of her old friends, laughing and chattering with unrestrained joy that contrasted sharply with her usual carefully managed behavior at Clarissa's formal gatherings. Midway through the main course, Richard directed the conversation toward business. Vincent, your mother mentioned you've been hoping for the Anderson portfolio at Harmon and Blackwell. Vincent nearly choked on his wine, clearly startled that his professional ambitions had somehow entered my discussions. With Richard, yes, sir. I've been working on the preliminary analysis for several months. Richard nodded thoughtfully. Good account. Challenging client. Anderson Sr. requires particular handling. Old school values, emphasis on personal relationships over quarterly performance. I've prepared extensive projections demonstrating growth potential under various market conditions, Vincent offered, clearly shifting into presentation mode. Richard waved this away. Projections are necessary, but insufficient. Anderson cares. More about character than charts. About integrity. About how you treat people. The pointed nature of this last comment wasn't lost on anyone at the table. Vincent's face flushed slightly as he absorbed the implicit connection between his professional ambitions and his personal behavior. I understand, he said quietly, glancing my way with dawning comprehension. As dessert was served, an artistic confection of chocolate and gold leaf, Patricia Blackwell addressed me directly. Eleanor, Richard mentioned you might join us for the Symphony Foundation Gala next month. We'd be delighted to have you at our table. Before I could respond, Clarissa interjected with barely concealed alarm. The Symphony Gala? But that's... She stopped herself, apparently recognizing the dangerous territory she was entering. The most exclusive social event of the season, Patricia completed the thought with perfect poise. Eleanor's contributions to the Arts Endowment have been substantial. We're fortunate she's considering serving on the board. The expression on Clarissa's face as she processed this information, that her mother-in-law, relegated to garage sleeping quarters, had been invited to an event she herself had unsuccessfully attempted to secure tickets for through 3 separate social connections, would have been comical had it not been so revealing of our fundamentally misaligned values. I haven't decided about the board position, I noted. Lily's weekend activities take priority, and I understand the symphony commitment involves Thursday evening meetings. Vincent stared at me across the table, comprehension dawning in his eyes. Even with access to the highest social echelons in Bayridge Harbor, I was still prioritizing family. Specifically, my commitment to attend Lily's Thursday gymnastics classes, which I'd maintained faithfully despite being increasingly marginalized in their lives. The contrast between my values and those that had guided Vincent and Clarissa's treatment of me could not have been more starkly illuminated. As the evening progressed to coffee and digestives in the suite's lavish living area, I found myself momentarily alone with Richard Blackwell near the twinkling Christmas tree. "Remarkable woman," he commented, watching Vincent and Clarissa across the room. "Building what you have while maintaining such modesty about your accomplishments. Most people in Bayridge Harbor can't wait to broadcast their smallest success." "Different generations, different values," I suggested. "Though I admit, maintaining privacy about my financial situation has occasionally proven instructive about people's true nature." Richard's sharp gaze met mine. "Including your sons?" I sipped my amaretto, considering how to respond. "Vincent is still learning the difference between success and value," I said finally. "Between connections and relationships. Between appearing important and being significant." "Significant lessons," Richard observed, "particularly for someone hoping to handle the Anderson portfolio." He paused, swirling the cognac in his snifter. "Anderson Sr. mentioned wanting someone with demonstrated family values, traditional respect, integrity that extends beyond business hours." The message wasn't subtle. Vincent's professional advancement, his desperately desired promotion, might well hinge on demonstrating the very values he had compromised in his treatment of me. "Vincent has many admirable qualities," I noted, my maternal instinct to defend my child rising despite everything. "He's intelligent, hard-working, dedicated to his family's security." "All necessary," Richard agreed, "but insufficient without character." He glanced toward where Vincent was helping Lily add an ornament to the suite's magnificent tree. "Though perhaps tonight represents an opportunity for recalibration." As the evening drew to a close, the confrontation I had both anticipated and dreaded finally materialized. After the Blackwells departed and Michael's family retired to their bedroom suite, Vincent, Clarissa, and I found ourselves alone in the main living area, Lily having fallen asleep on one of the plush sofas. "Why?" Vincent asked simply, the single word carrying the weight of countless questions. "Why maintain this secret all these years? Why let me believe you were just getting by when you were all this?" He gestured at our opulent surroundings. Considered my response carefully. "Initially, it wasn't a secret, just privacy about my financial affairs, something your father had always maintained during our marriage. Later, as your attitude toward me changed, I became curious about how far your misconceptions might extend." "That's not fair," Clarissa interjected. "Vincent has always supported you." "Has he?" I countered gently. "By dismissing my business acumen? By gradually excluding me from family events? By putting me in the garage while important people slept in bedrooms?" Vincent winced visibly at this last point. "I've apologized for that." "Yes," I acknowledged. "Tonight. After discovering I own your mortgage, your previous apartment building, and have professional connections with people you've been desperate to impress, would that apology have come if I were exactly who you thought I was?" The question hung between us, its answer evident in their silence. "That's what I thought," I said quietly. "And that's why this revelation was necessary. Not to impress you with my wealth, but to force a reckoning with your values." Clarissa shifted uncomfortably. "So this was all some kind of test? The presidential suite, the Blackwells, all of it orchestrated to make us feel small?" "No," I corrected, firmly. "This was a decision to stop accepting treatment beneath my dignity. Not because I own buildings or sit on boards, but because I'm a human being deserving of basic respect. The fact that you measure that worthiness by financial metrics rather than inherent value only highlights the problem." Vincent sat heavily in an armchair, suddenly looking exhausted beyond his years. "What happens now, Mom?" It was the crucial question. What would follow this dramatic reversal of perceived power and status? What kind of relationship could be built from the ashes of so many misconceptions? I looked at my son, seeing beyond his current discomfort to the little boy who had once helped me patch drywall, who had stood beside me at his father's funeral, who had somehow lost his way in pursuit of an image of success that had blinded him to genuine value. That, I said finally, depends entirely on what you've learned from sleeping in the master bedroom while your mother slept in the garage. 3 months after that transformative Christmas, spring sunshine warmed Bayridge Harbor, bringing cherry blossoms to the waterfront promenade and yacht owners back to their moorings. I sat at my favorite table at Harborview Cafe, financial statements spread before me, when Vincent texted asking if we could meet for lunch. "Already here at Harborview," I replied. "Join me if you're free." Our relationship had undergone a careful reconstruction since the Christmas revelation. The process hadn't been simple or linear. Genuine change rarely is. There had been awkward conversations, occasional backsliding into old patterns, and moments of surprising breakthrough. But gradually, something healthier had begun to emerge from the ruins of our previous dynamic. Vincent arrived 15 minutes later, dressed in his customary well-tailored suit, but wearing it with less of the self-conscious importance I'd noticed in recent years. He spotted me immediately, raising a hand in greeting as he navigated between tables. "Mom," he said warmly, bending to kiss my cheek before taking the seat across from me. "Sorry I'm late. Meeting ran long." "No apology necessary," I assured him, gathering my papers into a neat stack. "I've been productively occupied." His eyes fell on the Harborview Properties letterhead visible on top of my stack. "New acquisition?" "Considering one," I confirmed. "A mixed-use development near the community. College? Good bones but needs significant updating." "Sounds like your kind of project," he observed with a genuine smile. "See potential where others see problems." The comment reflected a new appreciation for my business approach, one of many small acknowledgments that had begun replacing his previous dismissiveness. I tucked the papers into my portfolio case as our server approached. "The usual, Miss Caldwell?" she asked with familiar warmth. "Please, Danielle. And my son will have—" I glanced at Vincent questioningly. "Whatever Mom's having," he replied easily. "Her judgment is generally better than mine." Danielle nodded and departed, leaving us in a moment of companionable silence. Vincent seemed different today. A subtle tension in his posture, a contemplative quality in his expression that suggested this wasn't merely a casual lunch. "How's Lily?" I asked, my weekly Tuesday afternoon with my granddaughter having become a cherished fixture in my schedule since Christmas. "Excited about her dance recital next week," Vincent replied. "She's been practicing her routine for anyone who'll watch. The living room furniture has suffered some casualties." I laughed, picturing my energetic granddaughter leaping across sofa cushions. "She mentioned you've been helping her practice. Something about Daddy being the best at twirls?" A flash of pleasure crossed his face. "I've been getting home earlier to spend more time with her before bedtime. Turns out I'm surprisingly qualified as a ballet partner." This represented another positive change. Before Christmas, Vincent had regularly worked until Lily's bedtime, prioritizing career advancement over family time. His recalibrated schedule suggested altered priorities. "And Clarissa?" I inquired, maintaining my commitment to civil relations with my daughter-in-law despite the lingering tension between us. "Busy with the hospital fundraiser," he said. "Though she mentioned appreciating your advice about the vendor contracts, apparently saved them a considerable amount." I nodded, recalling the careful conversation Clarissa and I had shared over coffee the previous week. Our relationship remained the most strained, her pride still smarting from the reversal of our perceived positions. But small steps toward mutual respect had begun. Our salads arrived, momentarily pausing the conversation. Once Danielle departed, Vincent set down his fork without taking a bite. "Mom, I need to tell you something important," he began, his expression serious. I felt a flicker of concern. "Is everything all right?" "Yes. Better than all right, actually." He took a deep breath. I've been offered a partnership at Harmon and Blackwell. Vincent! That's wonderful news, I exclaimed sincerely. Congratulations. He smiled, but the expression held complexity beyond simple pride. Thank you. It's what I've been working toward for years. And well-deserved, I'm sure, I said, noting his subdued response to what should have been a triumphant announcement. When will it be official? That's the thing, he replied, fidgeting with his water glass. I haven't accepted yet. This surprised me. Partnership at Harmon and Blackwell had been Vincent's singular professional focus for years, the goal that had ostensibly justified countless missed family dinners, abbreviated holidays, and relentless networking. May I ask why? I inquired carefully. Vincent met my eyes directly. Because I'm considering another option, one that's unexpected. He reached into his suit jacket, withdrawing a folded document which he placed on the table between us. I recognized the letterhead immediately. Anderson. Financial Group, one of the oldest and most respected investment firms on the East Coast. Richard Blackwell recommended me to head their new Bayridge Harbor office, he explained as I scanned the offer letter. It would mean building something from the ground up, rather than joining the established hierarchy at Harmon and Blackwell, the BO. Position described was prestigious yet demanding. A regional directorship with considerable autonomy, but significantly more risk than the safe partnership he'd pursued for years. The old Vincent would never have considered trading guaranteed status for entrepreneurial uncertainty. What does Clarissa think? I asked, genuinely curious about her reaction to this deviation from their carefully plotted career trajectory. Rueful smile crossed his face. Initially, horror. The Harmon and Blackwell partnership has been our goal for so long that considering an alternative felt like heresy. He paused, rotating his water glass thoughtfully. But we've had some good conversations about what really matters. About building something meaningful versus simply achieving status markers. This represented perhaps the most significant evolution in Vincent's thinking since Christmas, questioning the value system that had gradually corroded our relationship and diminished his connection to his authentic self. And now? I prompted. Now she's cautiously supportive, he replied. Especially after hearing Anderson Sr. specifically requested me because of my demonstrated family values and integrity. The irony of this phrase wasn't lost on either of us. I carefully refolded the offer letter, returning it to him. What's holding you back from deciding? Vincent looked momentarily vulnerable, more like the thoughtful boy I remembered than the status-conscious man he'd become. I wanted your perspective. Not just because of your business experience, but because... He hesitated, searching for the right words. Because Christmas changed how I evaluate important decisions. The simple acknowledgement warmed me more than any apology could have. Not just recognition of my financial acumen, but admission that the garage incident and its aftermath had fundamentally altered his approach to life choices. Tell me what you're thinking, I encouraged, genuinely interested in his reasoning rather than imposing my opinion. The partnership is the safer choice, he began. Established firm, clear hierarchy, predictable advancement. The Anderson position is riskier. Building a regional office means potential failure if targets aren't met, but it also means creating something, not just maintaining it. He paused, absent-mindedly arranging his silverware in perfect alignment. For years, I've prioritized security and status. The right address, the right connections, the right career trajectory. I thought that's what success looked like. His eyes met mine. But you built something remarkable without any of those advantages or preoccupations, without anyone's approval or recognition. The insight reflected genuine growth in his understanding of value versus appearance, a distinction that had eluded him for years as he pursued increasingly hollow markers of success. What does your intuition tell you? I asked. He considered this seriously. That I'm more excited about building something of my own than joining something others have built. That I'd rather Lily see me creating value than accumulating status. A small, self-deprecating smile crossed his face. That I might actually be more like my mother than I've been willing to admit. The comment, intended as a genuine compliment rather than the dismissal it might once have been, touched me deeply. Vincent was beginning to see beyond the modest exterior I'd maintained to the entrepreneurial spirit that had quietly built substantial success. Both choices can lead to meaningful work, I observed. The question is, which aligns better with who you want to become, not just what you want to achieve? He nodded thoughtfully. That's exactly it. Christmas forced me to confront the gap between who I'd become and who I want to be. His expression grew more solemn. Putting my mother in the garage while important people took the bedrooms. That's not who I want to be. Not what I want. Lily to learn about how we treat family. The direct reference to that painful incident showed how completely it had catalyzed his reevaluation. Not swept under the rug as an unfortunate mistake, but confronted as a revealing symptom of misaligned values. For what it's worth, I said after a moment, I think you have the intelligence and work ethic to succeed in either position. But building something from the ground up offers different satisfactions than maintaining established systems. Different challenges, different rewards. Like renovating a neglected property versus managing a turnkey investment, he suggested, using my business approach as an analogy. Precisely, I agreed, pleased by his understanding. Neither is inherently superior. It's about which process engages your particular talents and values. Our conversation continued through lunch, exploring not just the specific career decision, but the larger life recalibration it represented. Vincent asked thoughtful questions about my early property ventures, genuinely interested in understanding how I'd built Harborview properties through gradual reinvestment and hands-on management. As we finished our coffee, he broached another significant topic. Mom, Clarissa and I have been talking about the summer house rental. For years, they had rented an expensive vacation home on Crescent Island for 2 weeks each August. A status-driven choice based largely on the property's popularity among Vincent's colleagues and Clarissa's social circle. We're thinking of doing something different this year, he continued. Something more focused on family time than social positioning. What did you have in mind? I inquired, noting another shift away from appearance-based decisions. Actually, we were wondering if you'd consider joining us, he said, a touch of uncertainty in his voice. Lily suggested a cabin on Lake Champlain where we could all stay together. Swimming, fishing, board games, a real family vacation. The invitation represented significant evolution in our relationship. Not just inclusion in their plans, but restructuring those plans around meaningful connection rather than impression management. I'd like that very much, I replied, touched by the genuine desire for my company rather than obligatory inclusion. Vincent's smile reflected genuine pleasure rather than relief at an obligation fulfilled. Lily will be thrilled. She's already planning Nana and me activities. As we prepared to leave the cafe, Vincent reached across the table to cover my hand with his. Mom, I don't think I've properly said this yet. Thank you for what you did at Christmas. For revealing my financial situation? I asked, wanting clarity about what specifically he was acknowledging. For forcing me to see the disparity between who I claimed to be and how I actually behaved, he clarified. For not accepting disrespect, even when it would have been easier to stay silent. For showing me that true success isn't about appearances or connections or status. His understanding went beyond superficial recognition of my financial achievements to the deeper lesson of that Christmas confrontation, the difference between genuine worth and social positioning, between substance and appearance. The garage. Key unlocked more than just a sleeping space, I observed quietly. It unlocked the truth about who I'd become, he agreed. a truth I needed to face, however painful. As we walked together along the waterfront after lunch, spring sunshine warming our faces, I reflected on the remarkable journey these past few months had represented. Not just Vincent's evolution, but my own. From silent accommodation of diminishment to clear assertion of my worth. From acceptance of disrespect to insistence on proper recognition. The woman who had clutched property documents in Vincent's garage on Christmas Eve had found the courage to disrupt comfortable patterns and demand genuine respect. The son who had relegated his mother to sleeping among garden tools had begun the humbling work of reconstructing his value system around substance rather than appearance. The garage key had indeed unlocked a new reality for us both, one built on clearer vision and more authentic connection than we'd shared in years. 1 year after that fateful Christmas, I stood in my kitchen preparing appetizers for our family gathering. The house on Sycamore Lane, the modest home where I'd raised Vincent, built my business, and quietly accumulated my success, was filled with festive decorations and the scent of cinnamon and pine. Through the window, I could see snow beginning to fall, adding a perfect holiday touch to the December evening. The doorbell rang, and before I could wipe my hands on my apron, Lily's voice called out, "I'll get it, Nana. It's probably Uncle Michael and Aunt Diana." My granddaughter had arrived earlier with Vincent to help decorate the Christmas tree, insisting that certain ornaments, particularly the handmade ones she'd created over the years, required her expert placement. At 7, now nearly 8, she'd developed a confident independence that reminded me of myself at that age. I heard the door open and the cheerful chaos of Michael's family arriving, the twins' excited voices, Diana's warm greeting, the shuffle of boots being removed in the entryway. The sounds of genuine connection filled my home, a stark contrast to the carefully orchestrated social performances that had characterized family gatherings in recent years. Vincent appeared in the kitchen doorway, champagne glasses in hand. "Need help with anything, Mom? Would you arrange these on the serving platter?" I asked, nodding toward the stuffed mushrooms I'd just removed from the oven. "And perhaps open the Veuve Clicquot in the refrigerator." He moved beside me with easy familiarity. The awkwardness that had long characterized our interactions now replaced by comfortable companionship. As he arranged the appetizers with unexpected artistic flair, I observed the subtle changes in my son over the past year. The perpetual tension that had once tightened his shoulders had eased. The anxious attention to status markers had diminished. He seemed more present, more connected to the moment rather than constantly calculating its social value. Most significantly, the dismissive attitude toward my choices and lifestyle had transformed into genuine curiosity and respect. "Where's Clarissa?" I asked, noticing my daughter-in-law's absence. "Picking up her parents," Vincent replied carefully, removing the champagne cork with a satisfying pop. "They should be here soon." The inclusion of the Bradfords in our Christmas Eve gathering at my modest home represented perhaps the most dramatic shift in our family dynamic. Harold and Genevieve had never before deigned to celebrate holidays anywhere but their estate or similarly prestigious venues. Their willingness to join us on Sycamore Lane signaled not just accommodation, but recognition that genuine connection might occasionally take precedence over appropriate settings. The Blackwells sent their regrets. "But dropped this off yesterday," I mentioned, indicating an elegantly wrapped package beside the refrigerator. "They're in Aspen for the holidays, but asked me to join their table at the Symphony benefit next month." Vincent nodded, the mention of Richard Blackwell no longer triggering the anxious deference it once had. "How's the Anderson office coming?" "Along? Exceeding projections this quarter," he replied with quiet satisfaction rather than boastfulness. "We've secured the Westfield Pension Fund and 2 municipal accounts, building slowly but on solid foundation." His decision to accept the Anderson position rather than the Harmon and Blackwell partnership had proven transformative, not just professionally, but personally. The challenge of building something from the ground up had engaged his intellect and work ethic while allowing more reasonable hours and family involvement than his previous career path. I'm not surprised, I said sincerely. Your presentation to the hospital endowment committee was impressive. The board voted unanimously to transfer a portion of the portfolio to Anderson Management. He smiled, acknowledging my role in creating that opportunity without the defensiveness such professional intersection might once have triggered. Thanks for the recommendation, though I know it was given on merit rather than nepotism. Absolutely, I confirmed. I wouldn't risk the hospital's financial stability even for my own son. This professional honesty, the ability to separate family bonds from business judgment, had become another cornerstone of our rebuilt relationship. Vincent had come to value my financial acumen not just as his mother, but as a successful businesswoman in her own right. The sound of Michael's jazz playlist drifted from the living room, accompanied by children's laughter and adult conversation. Vincent and I carried our trays of appetizers and champagne flutes from the kitchen, joining the gathering that now flowed comfortably between dining room and living area. Diana immediately came to help, her initial awkwardness around me having long since dissolved into genuine friendship. Eleanor, these look amazing. Let me take that tray while you get comfortable. Michael raised his glass in greeting, his arm around his wife's shoulder. Merry Christmas, Ellie. The house looks fantastic. I glanced around at the decorations, not the professionally coordinated aesthetic Clarissa might have selected, but a warm collection of meaningful items accumulated over decades. Handmade ornaments from Vincent's childhood, the advent calendar Raymond had built the year we were married, Lily's construction paper creations prominently displayed alongside vintage glass baubles. It feels like Christmas should, I responded, accepting the champagne flute Vincent offered. The doorbell rang again, announcing Clarissa's arrival with her parents. Vincent moved to welcome them, his body language relaxed rather than performative. Through the open doorway, I watched their entrance. Clarissa elegant as always, but less rigidly perfect. The Bradfords appropriately well-dressed, but without the ostentatious display that had once characterized their appearances. Eleanor, Genevieve greeted me with a warmth that would have been unimaginable a year earlier. What a lovely home you've created here, so personal and inviting. The compliment, delivered without condescension, reflected the gradual evolution in our relationship since the Christmas revelation. Initial shock had given way to reluctant reassessment, followed eventually by genuine if still developing respect. Thank you for joining us, I replied sincerely. I know Lily is thrilled to have all her grandparents together for Christmas Eve. Harold Bradford, still imposing in his cashmere overcoat, surveyed the modest living room with what appeared to be genuine interest rather than evaluation. Vincent tells me you've owned this property for nearly 40 years. Remarkable stability in this market. The foundation of my investment approach, I acknowledged. Starting with secure bases and building methodically outward. A year ago, such direct reference to my financial strategy would have been unthinkable in conversation with the Bradfords. Now, Harold nodded with professional recognition of sound principles. Vincent's been applying similar methodology at the Anderson office, he observed. Conservative client acquisition, emphasis on relationship building rather than rapid expansion, seems to be serving him well. This acknowledgement of Vincent's success in a path divergent from their preferred trajectory represented significant evolution in the Bradford perspective. Their acceptance, however qualified, that happiness and achievement might take forms other than those they had prescribed. As everyone settled into comfortable conversation groups, I found myself beside Clarissa, who had maintained the greatest distance in our reconciliation process. Her pride had suffered the most severe wound when my true financial position was revealed, her carefully constructed social hierarchy most thoroughly disrupted. The salmon puffs are delicious, she offered, selecting another from the tray. Your recipe? My mother's, I replied. She was an excellent cook despite limited resources, made everything stretch without sacrificing flavor. Clarissa nodded, momentarily pensive. I never knew my grandmothers. Both died before I was born. She glanced toward where Lily sat on the floor playing a board game with the twins. I'm glad Lily has you. The relationship seems important to her. The acknowledgement, simple but significant, suggested Clarissa had begun to recognize value beyond the social currency she had previously prioritized. To see that a grandmother's love and wisdom might matter more to a child than perfect appearances or prestigious connections. Thank you for making that relationship possible, I said sincerely. For adjusting the schedule to accommodate our Tuesday afternoons together, she smiled, a genuine expression rather than her social mask. Vincent says those afternoons are when Lily learns her most important lessons. Something about compound interest and proper negotiation tactics? I laughed, recalling my recent explanation to Lily about why patience often yields better results than immediate demands. Financial principles apply surprisingly well to many life situations. Our conversation was interrupted by Lily's excited call from near the Christmas tree. Nana, can we open just one present tonight, please? All eyes turned to me, the adults, smiling at her transparent eagerness. I believe that's a family decision, I replied, glancing at Vincent and Clarissa. What do her parents think? Vincent and Clarissa exchanged looks, a silent communication passing between them. One gift tonight seems reasonable, Vincent conceded, as long as Nana approves. The deference to my judgment in this small family matter reflected our recalibrated relationships. Not complete role reversal, but acknowledgement of my rightful voice in family decisions. I think one gift is perfect, I agreed. And I know exactly which one Lily should open. I moved to the tree, selecting a small package wrapped in silver paper with a blue velvet bow. This one is special, I explained, handing it to my granddaughter. Something I've been saving for the right moment. Lily carefully untied the bow, her small fingers working methodically to preserve the wrapping paper. A habit she'd learned from me during our Tuesday afternoons together. Inside the box, nestled on white tissue paper, lay an antique key on a delicate silver chain. A necklace? She asked, lifting it curiously. More than that, I explained, aware of Vincent and Clarissa watching intently. This key opened the first property I ever purchased, the duplex on Cedar Street that began Harborview Properties. Vincent's eyes widened in recognition. The building that started everything. I nodded, turning back to Lily. I've kept this key as a reminder that sometimes the smallest things can unlock the biggest opportunities, that what seems ordinary might actually be extraordinary if you approach it with vision and commitment. It's beautiful, Lily whispered, running her finger along the key's intricate pattern. May I? I asked, taking the necklace and fastening it around her neck. When you're older, this key will unlock something else, your education fund, which will open doors to whatever future you choose to build. Vincent stepped forward, his hand resting lightly on my shoulder. Mom established a scholarship trust for you, he explained to his daughter. Enough to attend any university you choose, plus seed money for whatever venture you might want to start afterward. Like Daddy's office or Nana's buildings? Lily asked, her young mind already grasping the concept of investment and creation. Exactly. Like that, I confirmed. Or something entirely your own that none of us have imagined yet. Clarissa joined us, her expression reflecting complicated emotions as she touched the key hanging around her daughter's neck. That's incredibly generous, she said softly, and meaningful beyond the financial aspect. Family is the most important investment, I replied simply. Everything else is just assets on a balance sheet. As the evening progressed into dinner, around my dining room table, extended to accommodate our blended gathering of Caldwells, Bradfords, and Michael's family, I observed the remarkable transformation a year had wrought. Not just in Vincent's attitude toward me, or Clarissa's gradual recognition of values beyond social positioning, but in the authentic connections now flourishing where once there had been primarily performance and evaluation. After dessert, as coffee and conversation flowed easily between previously separate social spheres, Vincent raised his glass in an impromptu toast. "To mothers," he began, his gaze meeting mine across the table, "who sometimes have to teach difficult lessons about respect and recognition." He paused, emotion briefly tightening his voice. "And to garages, which occasionally serve as unexpected catalysts for necessary change." The reference to last Christmas, direct but gentle, acknowledged the painful incident that had precipitated our family's transformation without dwelling on its humiliating details. A recognition that sometimes our worst moments can ultimately lead to our greatest growth. As glasses clinked around the table, I felt a profound sense of completion. Not because our family had achieved perfection, genuine relationships are always works in progress, but because we had established a foundation of truth and mutual respect that could withstand future challenges. The garage key had indeed unlocked something precious, the possibility of being truly seen and valued for who I was, rather than who others needed me to be. The courage to disrupt comfortable patterns had created space for authentic connection to flourish. Later that night, after guests had departed and Vincent's family had retired to the guest rooms upstairs, I stood alone in my living room, gazing at the Christmas tree lights twinkling in the darkness. The woman who had once clutched property documents in her son's garage, feeling the weight of decades of misconception, now stood in her own home surrounded by evidence of genuine recognition and respect. The greatest gift that Christmas had not been the presidential suite revelation or the surprised recognition from the Blackwells and Bradfords. It had been the simple, transformative power of finally being seen, truly seen, by those whose vision had been clouded by their own limitations and assumptions. Sometimes the most valuable things we own aren't buildings or bank accounts or social connections. Sometimes they're the moments of clarity that allow us to recognize our own worth and insist that others recognize it too. Sometimes the most important key is the one that unlocks not just doors, but truth. As I turned off the tree lights and prepared for bed, I thought about Lily wearing the Cedar Street key around her neck, a symbol connecting past achievements to future possibilities. The legacy I was building extended beyond property portfolios and investment accounts to something far more valuable: the understanding that dignity is non-negotiable, that respect must be given to be received, and that true worth lies not in appearances but in substance. The garage that had once represented my diminishment had ultimately catalyzed my restoration, not just to proper sleeping quarters, but to my rightful place in my family's understanding and appreciation. The journey from that cold cot to this warm homecoming had required courage, confrontation, and the willingness to disrupt comfortable patterns. But some disruptions, however painful in the moment, create space for something better to emerge. Some keys unlock not just doors, but entire new realities. And sometimes, the most powerful thing we can do is simply refuse to sleep where others have decided we belong. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.